Hey guys, welcome to the Tech Career Booster channel. My name is Josh Ballardine, and in this video, I'm gonna be showing you how to build a very simple weather app. So this video is actually for those ones who never ever touched in the code before. So if you are sort of scared of becoming a software developer because you think coding is too complicated, my goal today is actually demystify that and show you how simple it is to actually create a web page to actually grab data from a weather API and bring that to the screen. That's what we're going to be doing today. So first things first, what you're going to need for that? You're going to need a tool to actually change your code, to type your code, and you're going to need a browser to actually check the results. Also, we're going to be using an external API to retrieve data for the weather. Basically, that's what we're going to be using today. So if you want to know how to actually build a web page to retrieve weather information, stay with me and I'm going to teach you right now. Let's start with the coding tool. What I can show you, I'm using Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is a tool you can use to actually type your code. It's going to be code coloring and do anything. So if you don't have anything, you are starting from completely scratch, you can download Visual Studio first. So go to their webpage, download that. You can install that in a Mac, in a Windows, wherever. Just install Visual Studio. That's going to be the easiest way to be typing your code. Just to be clear here, guys, you can type your code wherever you want. Any text editor, you can use any text editor at all. But some text editors, they are actually going to help you with your coding and coloring and like auto-completing something. So it's basically if you use an IDE. And if you didn't watch the video where I explained these jargons and things, go back to my channel and have a look in the video about the jargons, because I'm going to be talking many of them today. So if you don't understand something, feel free to shoot me a message or watch the other video called The Jargons of the IT. So if I'm talking something you don't understand, go to the other video, you're going to get it. Again, this is the IDE tool. So we're going to need that. Coming here, I've opened the tool already, and we are going to be creating our very first file. So what we are going to be doing here to create our file, don't need to be very expert to do that. You can click new file here or click new file here, and the very first file we're going to be creating is called index.html. We are going to be using three things today, guys, to actually create our code. One thing is HTML. The other thing is CSS, and the third one is JavaScript. So we are going to need to integrate JavaScript, CSS, and HTML to be able to achieve our goal today. And what's our goal today? First, I want to show you what we want to build. We want to build something to actually bring weather from an API which is providing weather details about any city. So what we want is actually a screen where you can input the name of a city, and when you hit a button, it's going to bring the weather details for that city. So let's start it. First, we have a hack here. When we type an exclamation mark and type enter, it's going to build this scaffolding HTML for you. That's from the Visual Code. And then we're going to be saving that with Ctrl S or Command S. So we are saving our first file, index.html. Don't worry to understand all the details, all the things in this file. Try to understand the concepts. So we're going to see how easy it is. We're going to be building that very quickly. So don't try to understand every single detail, because that's not the moment. I'm not going to be teaching you HTML. I'm not going to be teaching you CSS, neither JavaScript. The very goal for this video is actually show you how simple it is to build a web page consuming data from an API. So the basic thing is we have created an HTML. That's the basic structure for an HTML. We have the header here. We have the body, which is empty. And we are going to start to actually build our components. First thing, I want to give a title to my page. So what the title is going to look like. At the moment, we have a title, which is only document. I'm going to call it Tech Career Booster Weather App. That's what we're going to be creating. And then we can go to our browser and try to open that file. You guys are going to see we are going to have an empty page. So live coded, I've just created this index HTML file. I'm going to open that in the browser. And if I open that, you guys can see the title is here, Tech Career Booster App. And we have an empty page. And from that empty page, what you are going to be building is actually a title, an input field where you can type the name of a city, and a button. Let's start doing that. So first thing, I want to go to the body of my document. And in the body, I want to bring a title. And my title is going to be the name of my channel, Tech Career Booster. And I want to have a second title, which is going to be a bit smaller than the first one, called Weather App. That's how I want to call my app. If I save this, go back to the browser so you guys can check what's going on. I've just put in the screen in the browser Tech Career Booster and the name of my app. Back to the code, let's keep building that. Just to be clear here, guys, what we are building is actually the front end. Remember when we spoke about front end, back end, and everything? We are going to be creating a front end code today. Basically, everything we're going to do is front end. We are going to be connecting to an API to bring data from the back end, but you can understand this video as a day in the life of a front end dev. So let's get back here to our app. We were building a title. What else we want here? We want an input to actually type the name of the city. So this input, it's going to be an input type text. And we want to have an ID for this input field, which is going to be city input. That's what we want. We also want a placeholder, and the placeholder is going to be enter as a city. That's all. That's all we want for now. And let's see what we just add to the screen. We just add an input here, enter city. Nothing's going to happen. If you enter here, type enter, nothing's going to happen because we didn't program anything yet. So coming back to the code, we also want, other than the input, we also want a button. So this button is going to have something inside of the button. Is going to say get weather. That's what the button is going to be. So go back to the screen. We have an input and a get weather button. Nothing happens. We didn't program anything, but we do have those things in the screen. What else we want? We want to display the data. When it comes back, when we grab the data from the API, we want to display what? I would say we want to display in a title size the name of the city. So we're going to say city name placeholder. I'm writing that just for you guys to understand what's going to be in the screen before we actually load that, before we actually load the data we want. I also want to put here as a paragraph, and let me give an ID to this paragraph. Sorry, not ID, as a paragraph. I want weather description placeholder. And I also want weather data placeholder. So I've created 3 placeholders to grab details. So I'm going to have the city name, weather description, and weather data placeholder. I'm going to remove this text later. I'm leaving that here just for you guys to understand what I want to display when I hit the button. So when I type a city name here, hit the button, we want to go to an API, bring the weather details for the city we enter here, and we want to display the city name, a description for the weather, and more weather data. So I'm leaving these placeholders here just for you guys to understand. This is our HTML. We do have to identify these fields so we can connect that to JavaScript. On connecting that to JavaScript, then we're going to be able to change things in the screen with JavaScript. So JavaScript is actually going to execute the code and interact with our screen to change data and to grab the details from the API in the backend. As I previously mentioned in another video, HTML is just a markup language, so it's not going to do anything. It's only going to display things in the screen. So we're going to need JavaScript to actually grab the city name, go to the backend, go to the API, bring the weather data, and put that back in the screen. That JavaScript is going to interact with our DOM. Remember the DOM, which is the document model. JavaScript is going to interact with the document model. And for that interaction to happen, we are going to need IDs like this one. We're going to need identifiers. So we are identifying our input for the city. We're going to be identifying our placeholder for the city name. So we're going to call this city name. We're also going to be identifying these other two so we can change them later through JavaScript. This one we're going to call weather and description. And the other paragraph we are going to call that weather data. So now we have placeholders for that. That's it. That's our HTML. That's the only thing we need to display this in the screen. But just this by itself doesn't do anything. You can notice it's not going to do anything for you. You can hit buttons, you can type here, but nothing's going to happen. Why? Because we didn't program anything. So the next step is actually going to be creating your JavaScript file to actually interact with that. So first thing we want is create a new file. The new file, I'm going to call that weather.js, and we have an empty file here. What we're going to do with that? First thing, before we dive into the JavaScript, I want you to understand what we're going to do. And we are going to be connecting to an API. I'm going to be using this website called openweathermap.org. These websites, they do provide APIs for free. So if you come here, register yourself, you're going to need that to make your code work. So you can come to sign in and create a user for you, create an account. And if you go to APIs, after having your account, you're going to be able to get the current weather APIs. So if you go to their API documentation, after creating your user and grabbing your API key, because you're going to need that, I'm going to be using my own API key in this video. You guys are going to be able to see that, but obviously I'm going to delete it. You won't be able to use my API key. So in order to make it work, you guys are going to have to create your own. So you come to this website, which provides weather data for free, create your API key, and using your own API key, you're going to be able to retrieve data. How are we going to retrieve that? Just by calling this API. This API is a HTTPS API. You're going to be calling that, passing your API key and some city data. You can see here the first one, they mentioned the documentation, is using lat and long, but we are not going to be using that. We are going to be using the name of the city. So we can check the geocoding one, where you can see there's an option to actually send a city name as a parameter. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be calling this API, passing the name of the city and our API key, and we are going to expect a result like this one, which is a JSON. Remember when we talk about a JSON, I've talked about that in the jargons video as well. We're going to grab a JSON like this one, and we're going to be interested in some data from here, like the description. We're going to be interested in the name of the city. Also, we're going to be interested in these details like temperature, humidity, and pressure. That's what we want to display in the screen. So let's get back to our code and try to make the call for this API endpoint. As I mentioned before, first thing you're going to need is the API key. I'm just going to paste my one here because I don't want to type all the things again. So that's my API key, and I'm using a constant here. This constant is going to be used over the JavaScript, so you don't have to type that again. Don't bother with my key. You're going to have your own in order to create your code. Again, I'm going to delete this key. You won't be able to use that later on. And other than the key, what I want to do, I actually want to create a function to grab the weather. So my function is going to be called, very obvious, get weather. And what my function is going to be doing, first thing, I'm going to need to know what is in this input. So if we get back to our screen, I'm going to need the text here. For example, if I type Sydney here, I'm going to need to grab this word to actually call the API when I hit the button. So how I'm going to get the data from this input? The way to do that in JavaScript is actually connecting the DOM with the JavaScript. And the way to do that is getting the element by ID. That's why we defined an ID here. If you come back to our HTML, we have our input text with the ID. The ID is called city input. We're going to grab that. So again, we're going to be creating a constant. And that constant is going to be called city name. And we're going to be using the DOM, which is referenced in JavaScript by document. That's our document, HTML document. Wherever this JavaScript code is connected to, it's going to use its own document. The document is inside of. So it's going to use the document get element by ID. And which ID we want? We want city input. That's the one I want, and we want the value from that. Not the value max, just the value. Okay, now we have the whatever word we type in the screen, it's going to be in this variable, this city name. Not variable, it's a constant, but it's going to be in there. Whatever we type here. Then we can use a command to actually fetch the data and call another function. So what we want is actually connect to the API. I'm going to put a fetch command here and show you guys we are actually fetching from that site I just showed you. And if you go to the website and grab their documentation, you're going to see that's exactly the URL they are asking us to call. So if you get the geocoding, that's openbordermap.org data 2.5 weather. So we come here, same thing, data 2.5 weather. And then we have the parameter city. I have a special parameter here to bring the units in metric so we can understand it. And we're going to have my API key. Don't worry with this command. It's actually grabbing the JSON the API is going to return, and it's going to transform that in object and send it to our next function. It's going to be display weather. So I want to be creating that function here now. Function display weather. And from display weather, we're going to be grabbing the weather data, which is coming from the API. So we got the function display weather data coming from the API. What we are interested in there. If we come here, I'm calling that URL to show you what it's bringing. So that's exactly what it's bringing. And you can see we have the city name. For example, here I passed Brisbane at the name of the city. We have the weather as an array, where we have a component here, the first one, where we have the description, few clouds, and we have the main component with temperature and everything else. So we're going to be grabbing data from this JSON, which was returned. If you have a look in the raw data, that's just text. That's the JSON return from the API. It's just like a different, beautiful way the Firefox is making for us to actually see the JSON, but that's the raw data. That's what it's bringing from the API. And you can see that in their documentation, that's exactly what's expected. So we are expecting a JSON like this. And that's what we can see if we test in our browser. And that's exactly what we are going to be expecting from calling this data. And it's going to come as an object for this data variable here. So what we have to do first, we have to extract that in different variables so we can put in the right place. Let's grab a first thing here, which is going to be the name of the city. So let's grab data. From data, we're going to extract the name of the city. So if we check our JSON, we can see name here is going to be the name of the city. So that's what we are getting. Also, we are getting another const, which is an icon and description. It's also going to come from the weather. And as it is an array, we are going to have to grab the first position. I'm not about to explain arrays and things in this video, guys. Don't worry if you don't understand what's that, but you are gonna learn that when you properly learn JavaScript. For the moment, the only thing you have to understand is we are grabbing the first position of this weather thing. So you can see here it's returning an array. If you check the one we just called, you're going to see position 0. That's what we are getting. We are getting the position 0 of the array of the data, and from that position 0, we are grabbing icon and description. Also, we want to get the temperature and humidity from the same JSON. It's going to come from data.main. That's another object inside of our JSON. And inside of main, we're going to have temp and humidity. And we also want to grab the speed of the wind, which is just called speed, inside of data.wind. Basically, that's all the data we want to grab. So we're going to have these variables, name, description, icon, temperature, humidity, and speed. And then we want to actually put that in the screen. We want to display them where? In our placeholders. So if we get back to here, we're going to have our city name, our description placeholder, and our data. So how we're going to actually put that in these placeholders, how we're going to display that data there. As I mentioned to you guys, we use the DOM, the document, to make JavaScript interact with our HTML. So we're going to be using document.getElementById. And again, what we are doing here, we are referencing the IDs here. Remember when we create these IDs, we got city name, city or weather description, and weather data. So let's grab our city name and use that as the ID here. So city name, I just copy from there. And then what we're doing, you're going to be changing the text content. And what's going to be in the text content? It's going to be the name. So that's the name of the city. We also want to do similar thing with the weather description. So ID is going to be weather description. And what we're going to use for weather description, I want to just say weather. That's literal text. It's going to show the word weather in the screen. And after weather, I want to show the description. So I want to say the weather is, and whatever comes in the description from the API, whatever I retrieve from the API as description, I want to display here. And last but not least, I want to also do document get element by ID. I want to grab the last one from my HTML, which is weather data. Even though you know the IDs, I always recommend you to copy and paste. So you're going to make sure you're not going to making a typo here, typing something wrong, and then the ID is not going to connect and it won't work. And then you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to debug, trying to understand what's going on, and it's just not working. You don't know why. And most of the time, the reason is because you have a wrong ID or a typo somewhere. So what I want to do here, I also want to change the text content. And the text content here, for me, is going to be all other data we got here, which is temperature, humidity, and speed. So I want to write literal text, temperature, grab the temperature from the API and put graus Celsius, and humidity. Also, I want to put the humidity, and I will put speed. So it's going to be Celsius degrees, humidity, and speed. I want to display it all in the placeholder. All right, I've saved it all, and it is supposed to work as my JavaScript. So if I get back to the screen, you guys are going to see it's still the same thing, not going to work. And there is a reason why. The reason why it's still not working is despite I've done my JavaScript is here, nice and beautiful, and also we have our HTML. We are still missing one thing here in the HTML, which is connect the JavaScript to the HTML file. So how we're going to say to this HTML, it has to use that JavaScript inside of here. So we can actually have a tag here called script, and that script is going to have a source, which is the same folder, weather.js. That's my JavaScript file. So I'm calling the JavaScript file inside of my HTML. So I'm telling my HTML to use that JavaScript. Once I save that and refresh my page, probably I'm going to be ready to type Brisbane here, and I hit get weather. Didn't work. Is that up to date? Yes, it is. So I probably have some mistake here somewhere. What? Oh, obviously, button is not calling anything. You guys can see just a button called get weather. It doesn't do anything. It's missing one event call. So what's going to happen here? I have to call on click, which is the event when you click on the button. And then what I want to do when I click the button, exactly, I want to get weather. And what exactly get weather is, if we go back to our JavaScript, when we click the button here and we call get weather, that's the function we just create. That's the get weather function. So now I hope my code works. So go back here, Brisbane, and it's working. It's replacing all the placeholders with the data I want. So if I refresh the page, I got back the placeholders. If I type Sydney, I'm going to grab the data. Congratulations, guys. We just create a front-end HTML connecting to a back-end API and bring data. But we still have a few things to do, which I want to show to you guys. I said at the beginning of the video we were going to be using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, but we just used HTML and JavaScript so far. And this page, it's very ugly, isn't it? We can't present that as a job to anyone because it's not appealing. It's just ugly. So let's try to make it a bit more beautiful and more appealing to people. We just create all the code. It's retrieving data. Let's remove the placeholders first, because we already know where it's going, so we can leave this empty without placeholders. So we don't have those placeholders in the screen at the beginning when we load the page. Remove all of them. It's here, it's just the fields without anything. If we try to bring place where I live in, Sunshine Coast, at weather, it's going to be bringing to the correct place. But it's still not beautiful. So let's try to make it a bit more beautiful and build a CSS file. And we're going to call that istyle.css. And what we want in that CSS file, this one, guys, I'm going to just copy and paste from the other one I have here. And I'm going to quickly explain to you a few fields here. Again, don't try to understand everything, but I just want to show to you guys how to actually make a completely different style and make your site looks a way more beautiful when you use CSS. So what this CSS file is actually doing, it's actually changing the font family, changing a few paddings and margin, changing the background color of our page, and changing a bit of the way it's going to display things. It's going to try to centralize stuff in the middle of the page, so you can read that better. It's going to change the color of the title. It's going to change the input of the city. It's going to make a border. It's going to put the border in a color, and all those things. The button also, it's changing the color of the button, and that's what it's going to do to our page. So we still have to connect that. So if just create the CSS file is not enough, come here, update that, nothing's going to happen. We have to do similar to what we have done for JavaScript. We have to do that for CSS too. So for CSS, the way to put that is in the header. Inside of the header, we're going to create a link, and that link is related to style sheet, and that style sheet is going to be referenced by a file in the same folder, which is called style CSS. So if we just save that, hit our page, it's the same page, but a way better. It can look a way better than it was looking before. So we still can check if it's still working. So if we type Sydney, that's the current weather for today in Sydney. The weather is clear sky, temperature is 24 degrees, humidity is 42%. You can check it. Sunshine Coast, my place. Sunshine Coast, believe it or not, it's colder than Sydney today. Let's check how Melbourne is. We got Melbourne. Even Melbourne is actually hotter than Sunshine Coast today. That's weird. But yeah, guys, that's our app. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one. Let's do some changes here, just to make sure you guys can understand what I'm doing here. For example, if you change the color of the button, just to show you guys CSS. Again, that's the tool doing that. So if we hit here and try to choose another color, that's just a tool. So if you make the button green, that's what the VS Code can do. If you are using another text editor, you're actually going to have to find the hexadecimal code for your color. So that's the code for the color green. And if you come here, update the page. Sorry, I think I didn't save that. Update the page, why it's not getting... Oh, that's the hover. When you hover the button, it's going to get green, not when you change that. I didn't get the proper property. So the hover of the button is going to be green, not the button itself. The button itself is still blue. We also can change the color of the button to something different. Let's grab something really weird, like yellow. And then we update that. You guys can see button yellow. I do not recommend. You can't read that. Let's change that back. Save it, update our page. So we have a blue button with a hover of a darker blue. Basically, that's what a CSS can do for you. So if we come here, we also can change another color, other thing to play, color of the background. That's a very light gray. If you guys can have something different, let's say different color here, something more like yellow or like slightly yellow, the back end. So update here, you can see the background is going to be completely different. That was it, guys. I hope you guys are not scared of coding. That's what I wanted to show to you today. Don't be bothered with the details if you didn't get everything. But I wanted you to understand that it's actually easy to create a code. It's not like a monster or something which you should be scared of. Obviously, I have to make a disclaimer here, guys. It's not going to be something for production. Keep in mind, it's just an example code. There's a lot of error handling to be doing here, and obviously a lot of enhancements to be done if you want to use that as a production code. But I hope I have achieved my goal, which was showing you guys that creating a web page or creating a small app for the web is not hard. You could see, like, in half hour, maybe a bit more, we were able to actually create an app to display weather data. You can display weather from anywhere in the world with a few lines of code, as we just have done. So if you enjoyed this video, if you like that, share that with your friends and leave a thumbs up. That's going to help me and help the channel. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you all next time.